Hi, this is Joe. In this video, we're going to be mounting the front calipers on the forks. And we have our calipers that have just been recently rebuilt. Notice the first thing we're going to do is to put the spring into the bottom of the caliper. And notice the two bolts here. The portion of the spring that has the round clips goes the opposite end of the bleeding screw. If you look at the bolts, the right hand side has the flat tab which goes on the outside of the caliper, and on the inside the piece with the two clips goes down. Okay, we're all ready to do the calipers. One thing I do is I take all of my hardware and I wire brush them on a wire wheel on my grinder. That way everything is clean. All the crud that's on the banjo bolts are cleaned off. All of the grease and grit and grime are cleaned off the bolts. That way when they screw in, the threads are all clean. So again, makes life easy. Also makes the bike look like you've given a lot of detail to cleaning up, again, a small detail on the motorcycle. When you mount the caliper, you want the banjo bolt up to the top. The bleeding screw will be to the inside of the wheel, and Brembo will be written from the bottom to the top. And if you notice, there are two bolt holes right here. This is where the caliper will bolt on. But before we bolt on, we have to get our brake pads set up. So we're ready to do that at this point. Also, the caliper on the right hand side of the bike is going to have both brake lines on the longer banjo bolt, and then there is a hose that connects between the right hand caliper over to the left hand caliper. So that's according to what's specified in the manual. So again, we're going to take the large banjo bolt and we're going to screw that. Actually, before we do that, we're going to put some washers on that banjo bolt. So just for the time being, we're going to put that there, maybe even pull it out because I'm going to have to put the washers on. So we're going to go ahead and mount that here in a second. I have a set of new brake pads for the front, and what I decided to do is I'm trying a set of inexpensive import pads. Going to see how they hold up. If they don't hold up very well, then I will switch back to a name brand pad. But I'm curious to see how the inexpensive pads hold up. So let's go ahead and get these mounted in the calipers. If you notice on the caliper, there is an indentation or a slot cut in each side of the caliper, and on each brake pad you'll notice there's a tab. When you insert this, you insert the brake pad into the caliper, and then what you do is you fit those tabs into the slot in the caliper. Notice now that the brake pad is resting flush up against the pistons. And we're going to do the same thing to the other brake pad, and then we can put the caliper on the rotor on the bike. We're going to get the brake pad. We're going to slide that in. And then we're going to notice now we have a gap. Both pads are inserted properly in. Now what we can do is we can insert the caliper on the rotor, and again we're going to put the banjo bolt toward the top. I'm going to hold these with my finger. And then notice now the caliper is on the rotor. We can now take a bolt and we can attach the caliper to the mounting points on the front fork. And there's two mounting holes on each caliper. Now, once the caliper is mounted, we can now torque these two bolts. But before I do that, I want to get the hose and the banjo bolts on. Then we can torque everything down. So let's go ahead, and off camera I'm going to mount the caliper on the other side of the bike. Then we'll come back and show you how we're going to connect the hoses. We've taken all of the brake lines, put my hand behind there so they'll focus, and we've wire brushed all of the metal portions of the brake line fittings so they look really nice. All of the rubber hose portions have been sprayed with a ceramic 3-in-1 detailer. So this takes and works really well with various components like rubber and plastic, etc. I really like it. So that's what I use to clean up the components. This way, when the bike gets assembled, it's going to look like it's been very, very well detailed. Let's go ahead and start mounting these brake lines. On the banjo bolt, we put a new copper washer. We can now take and put the banjo bolt through the brake line. On the rear side, we have another copper washer, and make sure you use the new copper washers that come in the kit. Now what we can do is take and we can screw in the new brake line through the banjo bolt. Now we can route take and route the hose over to the other side, and then we can put the hose coming up from the master cylinder on the clip-ons down to the left-hand side of the caliper. I'll move the camera here. We can see how that's going to look. We have the front brake hose on the right-hand side. This hose will cross over to the other caliper. This is up against, there's a little stop right here. That's resting up against that stop. The lower hose, that goes up to the handlebars to the master cylinder, and that is all the way up against that stop. This is, according to the manual, this looks somewhat correct, even though not 100% correct. So when we get the master cylinder mounted to the clip-ons, we can make some minor adjustments and see if that's going to fit. If not, we will have to reroute the hoses. But now I'm going to go over to the other side and we'll mount the brake line to the left-hand caliper. And then at this point we can then mount the master cylinder and the electrics on the clip-ons, and then we can go ahead and bleed the brakes and get everything working. Now I have another line I'm going to put on the rear caliper, another brake line on the rear caliper. We'll do that right now.